Part 2 of the Glossary for Over the Top. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Over the Top by Arthur Empey. This is Tommy's Dictionary of the Trenches, Part 2. MGC, Machine Gun Corps, a collection of machine gunners who think they are the deciding factor of the war and that artillery is unnecessary. MG, Machine Gunner, a man who, like an American policeman, is never there when he is badly wanted. Maconochie, a ration of meat, vegetables, and soapy water contained in a tin. Mr. Maconochie, the chemist who compounded this mess, intends to commit hara-kiri before the boys return from the front. He is wise. Mad Minute, firing 15 rounds from your rifle in 60 seconds. A man is mad to attempt it, especially with a stiff bolt. Mailbag, a canvas bag which is used to bring the other fellow's mail around. Major, an officer in a battalion who wears a crown on his uniform, is in command of 2 companies, and corrects said companies in the second position of present arms. He also resides in a dugout. Maneuvers, useless evolutions of troops conceived by someone higher up to show Tommy how brave his officers are and how battles should be fought. The enemy never attend these maneuvers to prove their right. Mass formation, a close order formation in which the Germans attack. It gives them a sort of "come on, I'm with you" feeling. They would hold hands only for the fact that they have to carry their rifles. Tommy takes great delight in busting up these gatherings. Mate, a soldier with whom Tommy is especially chummy, generally picked because this soldier receives a parcel from home every week. Maxim, type of machine gun which has been supplanted by the Vickers in order to make Tommy unlearn what he has been taught about the Maxim. MT, mechanical transport, the members of which are ex-taxi drivers. No wonder Tommy's rations melt away when the MT carries them. MO, medical officer, a doctor specially detailed to tell Tommy that he is not sick. M&D, what the doctor marks on the sicker or side report when he thinks Tommy is faking sickness. It means medicine and duty. Mentioned in dispatches. Recommended for bravery. Tommy would sooner be recommended for leave. Mercy Kamerad, what Fritz says when he has had a belly full of fighting and wants to surrender. Of late this has been quite a popular phrase with him, replacing the hymn of hate. Mess orderly, a soldier detailed daily to carry Tommy's meals to and from the cookhouse. Mess tin, an article of equipment used as a tea kettle and dinner set. Mike and George, KCMG, Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George, an award for bravery in the field. Military Cross, a badge of honor dished out to officers for bravery. Tommy insists they throw dice to see which is the bravest. The winner gets the medal. Military Medal, a piece of junk issued to Tommy who has done something that is not exactly brave but still is not cowardly. When it is presented he takes it and goes back wondering why the army picks on him. MP, Military Police, soldiers with whom it is unsafe to argue. Mills, name of a bomb invented by Mills, the only bomb in which Tommy has full confidence, and he mistrusts even that. Mine, an underground tunnel dug by sappers of the Royal Engineer Corps. This tunnel leads from your trench to that of the enemy's. At the end or head of the tunnel a great quantity of explosives are stored, which at a given time are exploded. It is Tommy's job to then go over the top and occupy the crater caused by the explosion. Mine shaft, a shaft leading down to the gallery or tunnel of a mine. Sometimes Tommy, as a reward, is given the job of helping the REs dig this shaft. Minenwerfer, a high-powered trench mortar shell of the Germans, which makes no noise coming through the air. It was invented by Professor Kultur. Tommy does not know that it is near until it bites him. After that nothing worries him. Tommy nicknames them "Minis." Mouth organ. An instrument with which a vindictive Tommy causes misery to the rest of his platoon. Some authorities define it as a musical instrument. Mud. A brownish, sticky substance found in the trenches after the frequent rains. A true friend to Tommy, which sticks to him like glue, even though at times Tommy resents this affection and roundly curses said mud. Mufti. The term Tommy gives to civilian clothes. Mufti looks good to him now. Nap. A card game of Tommy's in which the one who stays awake the longest grabs the pot. If all the players fall asleep, the pot goes to the Wounded Soldiers Fund. Napu fini. Tommy's French for gone, through with, finished, disappeared. Napper. Tommy's term for bed. Neutral. Tommy says it means afraid to fight. Next of kin. Nearest relative. A young and ambitious platoon officer bothers his men 2 or 3 times a month taking a record of their next of kin because he thinks that Tommy's grandmother may have changed to his uncle. Night ops. Slang for night operations or maneuvers. 9.2. A howitzer which fires a shell 9.2 inches in diameter and knocks the tiles off the roof of Tommy's billet through the force of its concussion. No Man's Land. The space between the hostile trenches called No Man's Land because no one owns it and no one wants to. In France you could not give it away. NCC. Non-Combatant Corps. Men who join the army under the stipulation that the only thing they would fight for would be their meals. They have no king and country. NCO. Non-Commissioned Officer. A person hated more than the Germans. Tommy says his stripes are issued out with the rations and he ought to know. Number 9. A pill the doctor gives you if you are suffering with corns or barber's itch or any disease at all. If none are in stock, he gives you a number 6 and number 3, or a number 5 and number 4, anything to make 9. Nose cap. That part of a shell which unscrews and contains the device and scale for setting the time fuse. Some Tommies are ardent souvenir hunters. As soon as a shell bursts in the ground you will see them out with picks and shovels digging in the shell hole for the nose cap. If the shell bursts too near them, they don't dig. Observation balloon. A captive balloon behind the lines which observes the enemy. The enemy doesn't mind being observed, so takes no notice of it. It gives someone a job hauling it down at night, so it has one good point. Observation post. A position in the front line where an artillery officer observes the fire of our guns. He keeps on observing until a German shell observes him. After this there is generally a new officer and a new observation post. OC. Officer commanding. Officers' mess. Where the officers eat the mess that the OS have cooked. OS. Officers' servants. The lowest ranking private in the army who feeds better than the officers he waits on. Oil cans. Tommy's term for a German trench mortar shell which is an old tin filled with explosive and junk that the Boches have no further use for. One up. Tommy's term for a lance corporal who wears one stripe. The private always wonders why he was overlooked when promotions were in order. On the mat. When Tommy is hailed before his commanding officer to explain why he has broken one of the 7 million King's regulations for the government of the army. His explanation never gets him anywhere unless it is on the wheel of a number. On your own. Another famous or infamous phrase which means Tommy is allowed to do as he pleases. An officer generally puts Tommy "on his own," when he gets Tommy into a dangerous position and sees no way to extricate him. Orderly Corporal. A non-commissioned officer who takes the names of the sick every morning and who keeps his own candle burning after he has ordered lights out at night. Orderly Officer. An officer who, for a week, goes around and asks if there are any complaints, and gives the name of the complaining soldier to the orderly sergeant for extra pack drill. Orderly Room. The captain's office, where everything is disorderly. Orderly Sergeant. A sergeant who, for a week, is supposed to do the work of the orderly officer. Out of bounds. The official Army term meaning that Tommy is not allowed to trespass where this sign is displayed. He never wished to until the sign made its appearance. Out there. A term used in Blighty which means in France. Conscientious objectors object to going out there. Over the top. A famous phrase of the trenches. It is generally the order for the men to charge the German lines. Nearly always it is accompanied by the Jonah wish, "With the best of luck and give them hell." Oxo. Concentrated beef cubes that a fond mother sends out to Tommy because they are advertised as "British to the backbone." Packing. Asbestos wrapping around the barrel of a machine gun to keep the water from leaking out of the barrel casing. Also slang for rations. Pack drill. Punishment for a misdemeanor. Sometimes Tommy gets caught when he fills his pack with straw to lighten it for this drill. Parados. The rear wall of a trench which the Germans continually fill with bits of shell and rifle bullets. Tommy doesn't mind how many they put in the parados. Parapet. The top part of a front trench which Tommy constantly builds up and the Germans just as constantly knock down. Patrol. A few soldiers detailed to go out into no man's land at night and return without any information. Usually these patrols are successful. Pay book. A little book in which is entered the amount of pay Tommy draws. In the back of same there is also a space for his will and last testament. This is to remind Tommy that he is liable to be killed, as if he needed any reminder. Pay parade. A formation at which Tommy lines up for pay. When his turn comes, the paying officer asks, "How much?" and Tommy answers, "15 francs, sir." He gets 5. Periscope. A thing in the trenches which you look through. After looking through it, you look over the top to really see something. Physical torture. The nickname for physical training. It is torture, especially to a recruit. Pick. A tool shaped like an anchor which is constantly handed to Tommy with the terse command, "Get busy." Pioneer. A soldier detailed in each company to keep the space around the billets clean. He sleeps all day and only gets busy when an officer comes round. He also sleeps at night. Pipsqueak. Tommy's term for a small German shell which makes a pip and then a squeak when it comes over. Poilu. French term for their private soldier. Tommy would use it and sometimes does, but each time he pronounces it differently, so no one knows what he is talking about. Pontoon. A card game, in America known as blackjack or 21. The banker is the only winner. Provost Sergeant. A sergeant detailed to oversee prisoners, their work, etc. Each prisoner solemnly swears that when he gets out of dink, he is going to shoot this sergeant, and when he does get out he buys him a drink. Pull through. A stout cord with a weight on one end, and a loop on the other for an oily rag. The weighted end is dropped through the bore of the rifle and the rag on the other end is pulled through. Pump. A useless contrivance for emptying the trenches of water. Useless because the trenches refuse to be emptied. Pushing up the daisies. Tommy's term for a soldier who has been killed and buried in France. Queer. Tommy's term for being sick. The doctor immediately informs him that there is nothing queer about him, and Tommy doesn't know whether to feel insulted or complimented. Quid. Tommy's term for a pound, or 20 shillings, about $4.80. He is not on very good terms with this amount, as you never see the two together. Q.M. Sergeant. Quartermaster Sergeant, or Quarter as he is called, a non-commissioned officer in a company who wears 3 stripes and a crown, and takes charge of the company's stores, with the emphasis on the "takes." In civil life he was a politician or burglar. Rangefinder. An instrument for ascertaining the distance between 2 objects, using the instrument as one object. It is very accurate, only you get a different result each time you use it, says Tommy. Rapid fire. Means to stick your head over the top at night, aim at the moon, and empty your magazine. If there is no moon, aim at the spot where it should be. Ration bag. A small, very small bag for carrying rations. Sometimes it is really useful for lugging souvenirs. Rations. Various kinds of tasteless food issued by the government to Tommy, to kid him into thinking that he is living in luxury while the Germans are starving. Ration party. Men detailed to carry rations to the front line, pick out a black, cold, and rainy night, put a 50-pound box on your shoulder, sling your rifle, and carry 120 rounds of ammunition. Then go through a communication trench, with the mud up to your knees, down this trench for a half-mile, and then find your mates swearing in 7 different languages, duck a few shells and bullets, and then ask Tommy for his definition of a ration party. You will be surprised to learn that it is the same as yours. Rats. The main inhabitants of the trenches and dugouts. Very useful for chewing up leather equipment and running over your face when asleep. A British rat resembles a bulldog, while a German one, through a course of Kultur, resembles a Dachshund. Red Cap. Tommy's nickname for a staff officer because he wears a red band around his cap. Red Tape. A useless sort of procedure. The main object of this is to prolong the war and give a lot of fat jobs to army politicians. Regimental number. Each soldier has a number whether or not he was a convict in civil life. Tommy never forgets his number when he sees it on orders for leave. R.P. Regimental police. Men detailed in a battalion to annoy Tommy and to prevent him from doing what he most desires. Reinforcements. A lot of new men sent out from England who think that the war will be over in a week after they enter the trenches. Relaying. A term used by the artillery. After a gun is fired, it is relayed or aimed at something out of sight. Respirator. A cloth helmet, chemically treated, with glass eye holes, which Tommy puts over his head as a protection against poison gas. This helmet never leaves Tommy's person, he even sleeps with it. Rest. A period of time for rest allotted to Tommy upon being relieved from the trenches. He uses this rest to mend roads, dig trenches, and make himself generally useful while behind the lines. Rest billets. Shell-shattered houses, generally barns, in which Tommy rests when relieved from the firing line. Ricco. Term for a ricochet bullet. It makes a whining noise and Tommy always ducks when a Ricco passes him. Rifle. A part of Tommy's armament. Its main use is to be cleaned. Sometimes it is fired when you are not using a pick or shovel. You also present arms by numbers with it. This is a very fascinating exercise to Tommy. Ask him. Rifle grenade. A bomb on the end of a rod. This rod is inserted into the barrel of a specially designed rifle. R.I.P. In Monk's highbrow, Requiescat in pace. put on little wooden crosses over soldiers' graves. It means "Rest in peace," but Tommy says like as not it means "Rest in pieces," especially if the man under the cross has been sent west by a bomb or shell explosion. Road dangerous, use trench. A familiar sign on roads immediately in rear of the firing line. It is to warn soldiers that it is within sight of Fritz. Tommy never believes these signs and swanks up the road. Later on he tells the Red Cross nurse that the sign told the truth. Roll of Honor. The name given to the published casualty lists of the war. Tommy has no ambition for his name to appear on the Roll of Honor, unless it comes under the heading "Slightly Wounded." R.C. Roman Catholic. One of the advantages of being an R.C. is that church parade is not compulsory. Rooty. Tommy's nickname for bread. Route March. A useless expenditure of leather and energy. These marches teach Tommy to be kind to overloaded beasts of burden. RAMC. The Royal Army Medical Corps. Tommy says it means "rob all my comrades." REs. Royal Engineers. RFAs. Royal Field Artillerymen. RFCs. Royal Flying Corps. Rum. A nectar of the gods, issued in the early morning to Tommy. Rum Issue. A daily formation at which Tommy receives a spoonful of rum, that is, if any is left over from the sergeant's mess. Runner. A soldier who is detailed or picked as an orderly for an officer while in the trenches. His real job is to take messages under fire, asking how many tins of jam are required for 1917. SAA. Small Arms Ammunition. Small steel pellets which have a bad habit of drilling holes in the anatomy of Tommy and Fritz. Salvo. Battery firing 4 guns simultaneously. Sandbag. A jute bag which is constantly being filled with earth. Its main uses are to provide Tommy with material for a comfortable kip and to strengthen parapets. Sap. A small ditch or trench dug from the front line and leading out into no man's land in the direction of the German trenches. Sapper. A man who saps or digs mines. He thinks he is 33 degrees above an ordinary soldier, while in fact he is generally beneath him. Sausage balloon. See observation balloon. S.B. Stretcher bearer. The motive power of a stretcher. He is generally looking the other way when a 14-stone Tommy gets hit. Scaling ladder. Small wooden ladders used by Tommy for climbing out of the front trench when he goes over the top. When Tommy sees these ladders being brought into the trench, he sits down and writes his will in his little pay book. Sentry go. Time on guard. It means sentry come. Sergeant's mess. Where the sergeants eat. Nearly all of the rum has a habit of disappearing into the sergeant's mess. 75s. A very efficient field gun of the French which can fire 30 shells per minute. The gun needs no relaying due to the recoil which throws the gun back to its original position. The gun that knocked out Jack Johnson, therefore called Jess Willard. Sewed in a blanket. Term for a soldier who has been buried. His remains are generally sewn in a blanket and the piece of blanket is generally deducted from his pay that is due. Shag. Cigarette tobacco which an American can never learn to use. Even the mules object to the smell of it. Shell. A device of the artillery which sometimes makes Tommy wish he had been born in a neutral country. Shell hole. A hole in the ground caused by the explosion of a shell. Tommy's favorite resting place while under fire. Shovel. A tool closely related to the pick family. In France the shovel is mightier than the sword. Shrapnel. A shell which bursts in the air and scatters small pieces of metal over a large area. It is used to test the resisting power of steel helmets. Sicker. Nickname for the sick report book. It is Tommy's ambition to get on this sicker without feeling sick. Side parade. A formation at which the doctor informs sick or would-be sick Tommies that they are not sick. 60-pounder. One of our shells which weighs 60 pounds, officially. When Tommy handles them, their unofficial weight is 300 weight. Slacker. An insect in England who is afraid to join the army. There are 3 things in this world that Tommy hates: a slacker, a German, and a trench rat. It's hard to tell which he hates worst. Slag heap. A pile of rubbish, tin cans, etc. Smoke bomb. A shell which, in exploding, emits a dense white smoke, hiding the operations of troops. When Tommy, in attacking a trench, gets into this smoke, he imagines himself a magnet and thinks all the machine guns and rifles are firing at him alone. Smoke helmet. See respirator. Sniper. A good shot whose main occupation is picking off unwary individuals of the enemy. In the long run a sniper usually gets sniped. Snipe hole. A hole in a steel plate through which snipers snipe. It is not fair for the enemy to shoot at these holes, but they do, and often hit them, or at least the man behind them. Soldier's friend. Metal polish costing 3 halfpence which Tommy uses to polish his buttons. Tommy wonders why it is called soldier's friend. Somewhere in France. A certain spot in France where Tommy has to live in mud, hunt for cooties, and duck shells and bullets. Tommy's official address. Souvenir. A begging word used by the French kiddies. When it is addressed to Tommy it generally means a penny, biscuits, bully beef, or a tin of jam. Spy. A suspicious person whom no one suspects until he is caught. Then all say they knew he was a spy but had no chance to report it to the proper authorities. Spud. Tommy's name for the solitary potato which gets into the stew. It is a great mystery how that lonely little spud got into such bad company. Stand to. Order to mount the fire step, given just as it begins to grow dark. Stand down. Order given in the trenches at break of dawn to let the men know their night watch is ended. It has a pleasant sound in Tommy's ear. Star shell. See flare. Steel helmet. A round hat made out of steel which is supposed to be shrapnel proof. It is until a piece of shell goes through it. Then Tommy loses interest as to whether it is shrapnel proof or not. He calls it a tin hat. Stew. A concoction of the cook's which contains bully beef, Maconochie rations, water, a few lumps of fresh meat, and a potato. Occasionally a little salt falls into it by mistake. Tommy is supposed to eat this mess. He does, worse luck. Strafing. Tommy's chief sport. Shelling the Germans. Taken from Fritz's own dictionary. Stretcher. A contrivance on which dead and wounded are carried. The only time Tommy gets a free ride in the trenches is while on a stretcher. As a rule, he does not appreciate this means of transportation. Suicide Club. Nickname for bombers and machine gunners. No misnomer. Supper. Tommy's fourth meal, generally eaten just before lights out. It is composed of the remains of the day's rations. There are a lot of Tommies who never eat supper. There is a reason. SW. Shell wound. What the doctor marks on your hospital chart when a shell has removed your leg. Swamping. Putting on airs, showing off. Generally accredited to Yankees. Swinging the lead. Means throwing the bull. Sweating on leave. Impatiently waiting for your name to appear in orders for leave. If Tommy sweats very long he generally catches cold and when leave comes he is too sick to go. Taking over. Going into a trench. Tommy takes over, is taken out, and sometimes is put under. Taube. A type of German aeroplane whose special ambition is beating the altitude record. It occasionally loses its way and flies over the British lines and then stops flying. Tea. A dark brown drug which Tommy has to have at certain periods of the day. Battles have been known to have been stopped to enable Tommy to get his tea, or char as it is commonly known. Tear shell. Trench name for the German lachrymose chemical shell which makes the eyes smart. The only time Tommy is outwardly sentimental. Telephone. A little instrument with a wire attached to it. An artillery observer whispers something into this instrument, and immediately one of your batteries behind the line opens up and drops a few shells into your front trench. This keeps up until the observer whispers, "Your range is too short." Then the shells drop nearer the German lines. Terrier. Tommy's nickname for a territorial or Saturday night soldier. A regular despises a territorial, while a territorial looks down on Kitchener's mob. Kitchener's mob has the utmost contempt for both of them. Territorial. A peacetime soldier with the same status as the American militiaman. Before the war they were called Saturday night soldiers, but they soon proved themselves every night soldiers. The Old Man. Captain of a company, he is called the Old Man because generally his age is about 28. The best o' luck. The Jonah phrase of the trenches. Every time Tommy goes over the top or on a trench raid his mates wish him the best o' luck. It means that if you are lucky enough to come back you generally have an arm or leg missing. Thumbs up. Tommy's expression which means, "Everything is fine with me." Very seldom used during an intense bombardment. Time X. Expiration of term of enlistment. The only time Tommy is a civilian in the trenches, but about 10 minutes after, he is a soldier for duration of war. Tin Hat. Tommy's name for his steel helmet which is made out of a metal about as hard as mush. The only advantage is that it is heavy and greatly adds to the weight of Tommy's equipment. Its most popular use is for carrying eggs. TNT. A high explosive which the Army Ordnance Corps prescribes for Fritz. Fritz prefers a No. 9 pill. Tommy Atkins. The name England gives to an English soldier, even if his name is Willie Jones. Tommy's Cooker. A spirit stove widely advertised as a suitable gift to the men in the trenches. Many are sent out to Tommy, and most of them are thrown away. Tonite. The explosive contained in a rifle grenade. It looks like a harmless reel of cotton before it explodes. After it explodes, the spectator is missing. Toots Sweet. Tommy's French for hurry up, look smart. Generally used in a French estaminet when Tommy only has a couple of minutes in which to drink his beer. Top hats at home. Tommy's name for Parliament when his application for leave has been turned down, or when no strawberry jam arrives with the rations. Town Major. An officer stationed in a French town or village who is supposed to look after billets, upkeep of roads, and act as interpreter. Transport. An aggregation of mules, limbers, and Rough Riders, whose duty is to keep the men in the trenches supplied with rations and supplies. Sometimes a shell drops within 2 miles of them and Tommy doesn't get his rations, etc. Traverse. Sandbags piled in a trench so that the trench cannot be traversed by Tommy. Sometimes it prevents enfilading fire by the enemy. Trench. A ditch full of water, rats, and soldiers. During his visit to France, Tommy uses these ditches as residences. Now and again he sticks his head over the top to take a look at the surrounding scenery. If he is lucky, he lives to tell his mates what he saw. Trench feet. A disease of the feet contracted in the trenches from exposure to extreme cold and wet. Tommy's greatest ambition is to contract this disease because it means Blighty for him. Trench fever. A malady contracted in the trenches. The symptoms are high temperature, bodily pains, and homesickness. Mostly homesickness. A bad case lands Tommy in Blighty. A slight case lands him back in the trenches, where he tries to get it worse than ever. Trenchitis. A combination of fed-upness and homesickness, experienced by Tommy in the trenches, especially when he receives a letter from a friend in Blighty who is making a fortune working in a munition plant. Trench mortar. A gun like a stovepipe which throws shells at the German trenches. Tommy detests these mortars because when they take positions near to him in the trenches, he knows that it is only a matter of minutes before a German shell with his name and number on it will be knocking at his door. Trench pudding. A delectable mess of broken biscuits, condensed milk, jam, and mud, slightly flavored with smoke. Tommy prepares, cooks, and eats this. Next day he has trench fever. Trench raid. Several men detailed to go over the top at night and shake hands with the Germans, and if possible persuade some of them to be prisoners. At times the raiders would themselves get raided because Fritz refused to shake and adopted nasty methods. Turpenite. A deadly chemical shell invented by an enthusiastic war correspondent suffering from brainstorm. Companies and batteries were supposed to die standing up from its effects, but they refused to do this. 12 in 1. Means that 12 men are to share one loaf of bread. When the slicing takes place, the war in the dugout makes the European argument look like 30 cents. Up against the wall. Tommy's term for a man who is to be shot by a firing squad. Up the line. Term generally used in rest billets when Tommy talks about the fire trench or fighting line. When orders are issued to go up the line, Tommy immediately goes up in the air. VC. Victoria Cross, or Very Careless, as Tommy calls it. It is a bronze medal worn by Tommy for being very careless with his life. Very Lights. A star shell invented by Mr. Very. See Flare. Vickers gun. A machine gun improved on by a fellow named Vickers. His intentions were good, but his improvements, according to Tommy, were rotten. Via Blanc. French white wine made from vinegar. They forgot the red ink. Vin Rouge. French red wine made from vinegar and red ink. Tommy pays good money for it. Waders. Rubber hip boots, used when the water in the trenches is up to Tommy's neck. Waiting man. The cleanest man at guard mounting. He does not have to walk post, is supposed to wait on the guard. Washout. Tommy's idea of something that is worth nothing. Water bottle. A metal bottle for carrying water, when not used for rum, beer, or wine. Waterproof. A rubber sheet issued to Tommy to keep him dry. It does when the sun is out. Wave. A line of troops which goes over the top in a charge. The waves are numbered according to their turn in going over, for instance, first wave, second wave, etc. Tommy would sooner go over with the 10th wave. Wet canteen. A military saloon or pub where Tommy can get a wet. Most campaigns and battles are planned and fought in these places. Whiz bang. A small German shell which whizzes through the air and explodes with a bang. Their bark is worse than their bite. Wind up. Term generally applied to the Germans when they send up several star shells at once because they are nervous and expect an attack or night raid on their trenches. Windy. Tommy's name for a nervous soldier or coward. Wipers. Tommy's name for Ypres. Generally he calls it Yeeps. A place up the line which Tommy likes to duck. It is even hot in the winter time at wipers. Wire. See barbed wire, but don't go over the top to look at it. It isn't safe. Wire cutters. An instrument for cutting barbed wire, but mostly used for driving nails. Wiring party. Another social affair for which Tommy receives invitations. It consists of going over the top at night and stretching barbed wire between stakes. A German machine gun generally takes the place of an orchestra. Woodbine. A cigarette made of paper and old hay. Tommy swears by a woodbine. Wooden cross. Two pieces of wood in the form of a cross placed at the head of a Tommy's grave. Inscribed on it are his rank, name, number, and regiment. Also date of death and last but not least the letters R.I.P. Working party. A sort of compulsory invitation affair for which Tommy often is honored with an invitation. It consists of digging, filling sandbags, and ducking shells and bullets. Zeppelin. A bag full of gas invented by a count full of gas. It is a dirigible airship used by the Germans for killing babies and dropping bombs in open fields. You never see them over the trenches. It is safer to bombard civilians in cities. They use iron crosses for ballast. This is the end of Tommy's Dictionary of the Trenches. The next file will begin the story proper.